Excuse me, sir, can you take a seat? Welcome to the City Council meeting open session of May 21st, 2019, where we've just reconvened from closed session where direction was given and no action was taken. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Salute. Pledge. Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
I'll second that.
Motion carries.
Okay, we're moving on to presentations and proclamations. We have a proclamation tonight for an individual who's very dear to this community, J.R. Simpson. Is there someone here to receive it? Okay. I know you, girl. I haven't seen you in a while. Proclamation honoring Alan J.R. Simpson. Whereas Alan J.R. Simpson has dedicated his life to the community of Oroville with distinction, committed to fire service, serving as a council member and as a community volunteer and advocate. And whereas the Oroville City Council and all departments of the city of Oroville recognize and appreciate the extraordinary contributions given by J.R. Simpson for this community. And whereas to J.R., firefighting was his life. He served over 20 years with the city of Oroville, and before that with El Medeo Fire. And whereas J.R. has served the community as a council member with a deep sense of devotion to duty and has been instrumental in numerous citywide projects over the years. And whereas J.R. was a family man, he loved and cherished his family, especially his grandson, who was the light of his life. And whereas J.R. was also known for his love of cold beer and sports, he could always come up with a reason to enjoy a cold brew with a friend or family member, whether it be to socialize, talk sports, or have a meal. And whereas J.R. will be sincerely missed by all, our community will not be the same without him. Now, therefore, I, Chuck Reynolds, Mayor of the City of Oroville, in concurrence with the Oroville City Council, do hereby honor Alan J.R. Simpson for his loyal and dedicated service to the community of Oroville, and urge all citizens to join me in offering the sincere expression of appreciation, dedicating his life to service and for his love of our community. Okay. Public communication. This is where we hear on non-agenda items. If anyone wishes to speak or address the council, now is your time. Do we have any speakers, Madam Clerk?
Yes. We have two public speakers.
How many?
Two.
Okay.
We have Bobby O'Reilly and then the cameraman. Oh, I'm sorry, there are three. I have one for Billy Spear also.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'd like the following information to be that of public record. I recently put in a public records request for all messages from 2 council members and their social media accounts. The response I received was that 2 of the council members do not use their social media accounts to communicate through Messenger. Many of us know that to be false, as many of us have messages from the council members through Facebook Messenger. One Oroville citizen actually has a message from Janet Goodson stating that she can get him in on the marijuana business even though his property is outside city limits. I also requested a list of all persons currently blocked by council members Draper and Goodson. The 2 councilors have many citizens blocked, therefore taking away our freedom of speech and silencing critics. Also, in placing public information requests, I have found many discrepancies, one of which was a response from Janet Goodson stating she has no emails regarding cannabis in her email account. My understanding after further clarification is that her response was in regard to her personal email. I know that also to be false due to all of the emails in her city email account being forwarded to her personal email address, as can be seen in her city emails. Some may also remember the beginning of last year when Janet was asked about a private meeting she had with investors from out of the area that flew in to discuss marijuana business. Janet claimed at the time that she did not meet with any investors and that she was simply having coffee with the Exchange Club. Come to find out, the Exchange Club had not had a coffee meeting, and a letter in her city email that she wrote states she did indeed meet with the investors at the airport that flew in from out of the area. The lies continue to build up with these 2 councilors. I will be retaining an attorney to obtain all documents and information I have asked for, as all requested information does fall under the public information request, and all elected officials must keep possession of such material for a specific amount of time and present it when a request is made. Also, to discuss the violations of the councilors and the First Amendment rights of their constituents as elected officials that have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States.
The cameraman and then Bill Spear.
Good evening. Today I'm going to speak about an issue I encountered when I asked to inspect and view the Oroville Police arrest log for April 2019 under the Public Records Act. And it's not that I wrote down the correct date and said the wrong month, or the clerk thought I was requesting something I was not entitled to. Those 2 issues were resolved. My issue is when I viewed the arrest log, I was told that it is $6 a page to copy. And the log being 6 pages long, it would cost $36 to make a copy. California Government Code 6253B, except with respect to public records exempt from disclosure by express provision of law, each state or local agency, upon request for a copy of records that reasonably describes an identifiable record or records, shall make the records promptly available to any person upon payment of fees covering direct cost of duplication or a statutory fee, if applicable. Upon request, an exact copy shall be provided unless impractical to do so. Now, what is what do you mean by these statutory fees? Well, the statutory fee is set by a legislator and not a local ordinance. And usually, though, that fee is between 10 to 25 cents per page. For reference, I went to the surrounding agencies, the California Highway Patrol and the Butte County Sheriff's Office, to request the same records. The California Highway Patrol charges 30 cents per page, while the Butte County Sheriff's Office only makes their arrest logs available online, which is a violation of Government Code 6253.9E. Nothing in that section shall be construed to permit an agency to make information available only in electronic format. What my point is trying to make here is I think we're way overcharging to copy an 8 by 11 sheet of paper like this. For $6, I can go and get almost 200 of these at
Time.
Walmart. Thank you.
Bill Spear.
Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, just come to pray. It's a beautiful day. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity as citizens of Oroville gather here this evening. I pray for your blessings. In your word, it says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given. So we ask for wisdom for our city leaders, that you would guide us through the challenges that we have for all our public servants, our police and fire, and all our council members. We pray for their families. We pray for that you would encourage and strengthen, not let them get wore down. We thank you for all the public service groups in our city, and we pray that you would help us all to come together and rise to the challenges to help comfort the people in Paradise and Concal and Magalia, that you would help us to get along. We pray for the churches of Oroville, that we would arise to the challenges and put aside all of the differences. We pray for the homeless and the people in the jail. You have them here for us to deal with, not to shuffle them around. So we pray, Father, that you would help us for our youth, Lord. You are our only hope for the youth, and we pray your protection. We pray your guidance, your direction. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, in Oroville. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar. Looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move that we,
Mr. Mayor, I do have 2 public comment cards for the consent calendar
Okay.
for item 2 and 3.
Okay.
Bill Spear.
Item number 2.
They adopt the consent calendar together usually, so it's you can speak on the consent calendar.
I was wanting to speak on item 2.
Well, so item 2 and 3 are part of the consent calendar.
Let's do this. Let's remove item 2 and 3 from the consent calendar. We'll pass the consent calendar without those, and then we'll deal with 2 and 3 separately.
I'll make a motion that we pass the consent calendar, removing items 2 and 3.
I second that.
Okay, item number
Motion
2.
carries.
Sorry. Shouldn't have had that second cup of coffee. Okay, so item 2 and 3 has been pulled. Who would like to speak on item 2?
Bill Spear.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, I was reading over the nuisance code, and it's important that we have a nuisance code. But I had a lot of concerns as I read it over. When it first got brought to council, there was a couple exceptions that our current code wasn't covering, and so it needed to fill in the gap on a certain few items. As I read over this new code, it seemed like it covered a very wide variety of stuff, and my concerns are is that it gives way too much authority to code enforcement and takes away a lot of the people's due process. One of the constituents spoke about their concerns over the due process. We already have so many regulations, and putting on more regulations and more regulations and more regulations, I believe we need to be taken off taking away regulations instead of becoming more regulated. On our store down the street, the awning came loose, and so we were there screwing it back together because we don't want stuff hanging down. We want to fix it, so we're there fixing it. Somebody called code enforcement on us, gave us a citation, had to come down, pay double the amount. You want people to take care of their properties and do stuff. You need to make it easier for them, not put more regulations, more code. You got to do this. You make it hard to get a permit, hard to do the financial part. I would recommend not making it so broad, relooking over. If you look, they cover everything in it, and I think it's way too broad, way too much to fill the little gap that they were talking about needed. We need less regulation, not more. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on item
Mr. Mayor, that is the only speaker on this item.
Is there any comments from the dais?
Just one to our attorney. So with the nuisance code and this change, are we adding a great body of, additional layers, or pretty much just kind of replacing?
No, in fact, what you're doing is you're streamlining the process. You're actually not adding more regulations, you're streamlining the regulations. The speaker mentioned due process. Due process is the ability to get a fair hearing if you receive a citation that you believe is unjust. Well, we added in a lot of due process into this. Before, it was very difficult to get a hearing. It was problematic, it was cumbersome, and it had to be done by the entire council, which would result in delays. This can be done in a streamlined process in a shorter period of time, so you actually have more due process under this current iteration of the nuisance code, not less.
And due process helps protect the constituents.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a good thing.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I'm kind of curious, Mr. Spear, why didn't you appeal that, if that was the case? If you were simply repairing something that was existing, why didn't you? That sounds like a valid explanation.
Right, and it's the process to appeal it. It's a lot easier just to pay it and move on. I'm a very busy person, and but somebody did use code enforcement to target people, and I've had instances where after I spoke up in city council that my job got visited by the city, and I spoke out about it here in city council. And the chief spoke about being diligent and watching to make sure that doesn't happen. But as I read through it, I had concerns, and I just think that it should be read through a little closer, because there's a lot in it. And when you first got brought to the council, I thought that it sounded like a real narrow reason, a tweak that needed done. And then when I read through it, I was like, wow, this is a lot of stuff, and they're covering a lot of stuff. And then I had the concerns for it being used in not a good manner, because before this last election, there was, people in the city council showing up with code enforcement, and, I just want to make sure that everyone's treated fairly.
I appreciate that. Okay, we're looking for a motion to adopt number 2 on the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion that we adopt an ordinance to amend Chapter 9.08 of the Oroville Municipal Code titled Nuisance Code.
I'll second.
Motion carries.
Okay, item number 3 was pulled as well. Who wishes to speak on item number 3?
We have one public speaker card for Bill Spear.
I know that it's kind of late to be speaking on this, that it's just a little tweak that you're doing on this actual code, that they had the public comment part already, and I should have been here and spoke up on it then. And it's a really awesome thing, the Business Improvement District, and everyone should be for it. but there are a few people in the business improvement district that are, you know, barely making it. And this is like, we just passed a 1 cent tax and it's gonna increase for everyone. And I just think there should be an opt-out button for when people come in that are small businesses that are struggling. They should be able to opt out of it and not have to pay the fee. When they brought that before the council, they, you know, it was awesome, and everyone's wanting to encourage them, and we want to encourage people to work together. But there are a few people that are struggling, small business owners, that, you know, every dollar counts, and there should be a way that the people that want it, and there's a lot of people that want to be involved that can, and you guys can still collect the money, but there should be an opt-out button where they don't have to participate if they're, you know, barely making it. And, you know, with that extra 1 cent tax, it's going to be bringing a whole bunch of money into the city to improve Oroville, the downtown. So for the small businesses downtown to have another tax on top of this when they get their business license, I think it's taxing them a little too hard for the small mom and pop store that's barely making it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the dais?
Yeah, I
It
do.
was my understanding that this wasn't a requirement, correct?
Jackie, I don't have a screen. Sorry, I didn't have a screen. Go ahead, Councilmember Goodson.
It was my understanding that this was not a requirement. Am I correct?
Not exactly.
All right.
Madam Councilmember, if I might. This is an imposition of a business improvement district fee that the businesses have asked for, and this was initiated by the businesses. There are certain businesses that are exempt. Nonprofits are exempt unless they voluntarily want to join. You know, churches, other, you know, 501c3 organizations are exempt. They have an option to join if they want, but businesses that obtain a business license from the city are expected to contribute if they live within the jurisdictional boundaries of this business improvement district.
Thank
And
you for
it's a
clarification.
process created by state law that we were petitioning, and we're following that process.
Absolutely. And I'm not here to give anyone business advice, but it would be an excellent opportunity to network and grow your business and share ideas instead of everyone being separated in the downtown area, be more of a unit. Councilmember Smith, you have a comment?
Just to clarify too, it's not really a tax. It's an assessment on the businesses, and it's self-assessed essentially. And those dollars will be directed to the ODBA, which is the Downtown Business Group. And then so the businesses themselves will control the destiny of those dollars that are collected. The city is just simply a mechanism for the collection of those dollars to go along with improving the district. So C3, C6s are exempt unless, as the attorney has pointed out, unless they desire to opt in, you know, to that particular program. And then annually, that program is relooked at by the businesses to determine if it makes sense for them to continue on. So I just wanted to bring some additional clarity to that.
Thank you. Councilmember Hatley.
Thank you. Isn't this, and this will be to the attorney, when this same process went through for the hotels and that, it was my understanding that, except for the exempt people, which, but everybody had to join, it was like 100% participation, or, I mean, you didn't have a choice. If there was more than 51% or something, then everybody had to do it. Is this the same thing?
Very similar, yes.
Okay.
There are some differences in the process and the procedure and how it gets enacted, but as to that point, you are correct. If a majority of the businesses want to assess themselves, then everybody gets assessed. And again, we did follow the process and the procedure to hold a protest vote, and to my knowledge, we received two protests, might have been three, but a very minimal amount of protests.
And again, for clarity, the city doesn't receive anything for, this is not a city, the city didn't institute this or instigate it in any way, shape, or form. We're just kind of a conduit for the process. So just so everybody understands that this wasn't something the city was trying to do to get money from the businesses.
That's correct. The city does not get a dollar from this.
Are there any other comments? Looking for a motion to adopt ordinance number 1839.
I move that we adopt the ordinance 1839,
I second.
establishing a business improvement district.
I second.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to regular business. Item number 5, pavement rehabilitation list for submittal to California Transportation Commission. Who's speaking on this? Mike?
So this is our annual list for the CTC. It's required as part of our SB1 funding that we get of additional money for roads. They require us to submit a list every year and adopt a resolution incorporating the SB1 dollars into our budget and to list which streets we're going to address that year. And then we have another filing with them in October to let them know what streets we did accomplish in the previous year. So this comes up every year around April or May to let the CTC know what streets we're going to pave, and will be part of our annual process now for adopting these dollars.
And how do you determine which street, are you covering a grid in succession, or what's going on?
We're working off a pavement assessment that was done in 2011. It was a pretty long list generated of roads that needed the most attention. And then I also coordinate with Wade, our public works director, who's out there filling the potholes on a regular basis. And then, trying to spread the work around through the city to various parts like we did last year with the RSTP project.
Great. Do we have any speakers on this?
There are no public speakers on this item.
Anyone from the dais? Councilmember Draper, please.
I just wanted to find out if anything has been learned about DWR paying for damages that they have caused to our roads. I'm also concerned due to all the heavy truck traffic from trucks from the campfire, hundreds of them every day. And they're not just on Highway 70. You see them on every street through town. I've seen them on the roundabout up here on Montgomery Street. I'm wondering when there's going to be any kind of compensation from all these trucks that are damaging our roads as fast as we can go out there and fill up a pothole,
I can answer the second part of that question. That is that Assemblyman Gallagher and State Senator Nielsen have put $2 million in the budget specifically for that purpose. And at this point, it's still in the budget. Of course, it has to be finally approved, but if so, it is in fact to reimburse the city of Oroville for that type of cost.
And how much would the city get? Is that
$2 million.
$2 million?
Yes.
Okay. And that is coming from?
It's coming from the state budget, just general fund, as part of the campfire relief.
Okay.
They've put in $2 million. Those two have put in $2 million for the city of Oroville, and they put in $3 million for the city of Chico.
And DWR, their share?
I can't answer that.
DWR came out when the initial event occurred in February of 17 and did an assessment of the roads because they were going to be bringing in very heavy equipment and things. And they came up with a very specific route that they were going to bring those equipments into across Nelson through that the new roundabout up there. And there was some damage to that. When the recovery effort's over, they're going to reassess the roads and they're going to be responsible for any damages or impacts onto those roadways. Now, the other path of travel that was used was all state highway. It was specifically chosen for that. It's 162 or Dammed Olive Highway up to the dam is where the path that they were supposed to be traveling. That's state highway responsibility, and they'll be responsible for any damage to that road.
But we all know they are taking city streets and have done it. I live on Hammond Avenue. I've seen those trucks from DWR on Hammond Avenue, because I think a man that was driving it lived a couple of blocks up, and he would park it there. But I'm just saying, they've been all over town, you know, so I was just wondering if there was anything on that. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Looking for a motion to adopt resolution and project list incorporating SB1 funding into the 2019-2020 budget for 2019-2020 road rehabilitation.
I move that we adopt the resolution and the project list incorporating the SB1 funding into the 2019 and 20 budget for 2019, specifically for road rehabilitation.
I'll second that.
Motion carries.
Moving on to item number 6.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to recuse myself on this.
Yes, sir. Who's speaking on this item?
This will be Jordan Daly. She's our SBF coordinator.
Good evening, Mayor Reynolds, council members, Jordan Daly, SBF Program Specialist with the City of Oroville. What you guys have in front of you is the 11th amendment to the SBF agreement with DWR. A little background, annually since 2013, DWR has requested an amendment of the Supplemental Benefits Fund Implementation Agreement with DWR for a 1-year period pending the final approval of the FERC Project 2100. As of today, the license approval remains pending. DWR has requested that the city approve the 11th amendment of the standard agreement, which will extend the term for 12 more months. The terms of the original agreement and the terms of each of the previously approved amendments will remain in place and unchanged. Staff is recommending the approval of this resolution 8784, amending the SBF implementation agreement with DWR, extending the terms of the agreement through July 20th, 2020. Any questions from the council?
I have some questions. I can't believe that we're sitting here talking about an 11th extension. This is, why isn't this, is there any progress made on this at all, or are we just going to keep kicking this can down the road?
I'm hoping there's more progress. It's in FERC's hands right now. That's who we need to sign this agreement to move forward. Thankfully, this amendment has allowed us to have a little bit of funding through DWR, pending the agreement being signed.
Eric, did you have anything to say about this?
I do have Eric C. with me from DWR if you guys have any questions.
Jordan explained it pretty well. There's different components of the settlement agreement, supplemental benefits fund, as far as providing funding. And so what this funding is, it's related to when the license was going to be signed or issued. When the new license was issued, the department would provide a one-time payment of $4,135,000. It was foreseen back in I think it was about 2010 or so that license delays were going on. It was slowing down. So instead of having the process just come to a screeching halt until the license was issued, it was decided to start taking advancements, or DWR and the city set up this what we have right now, which is basically taking advancements on that $4 million payment. They've been going at $100,000 a year. 2 years ago in 2017, following the spillway incident, we actually advanced $3 million of that fund. So there's $235,000 left. So that total amount is part of this contract. And so what we've been doing is with the city, the contract provides a vehicle for DWR to give the money to the Supplemental Benefits Fund through the city. So this would just be a 1-year extension to allow us to, again, for another year, provide that $100,000 installment. So theoretically, if the license isn't issued in the next year, then we'll be back here again next year this time doing the same thing, asking for a 1-year extension for time so we can then, advance that money again.
Well, I for one, we're looking at the 11th extension. I for one would rather be more aggressive with this. I'm looking at this is a new council with new eyes on this, and I would like to approach it at a little different perspective. I would like maybe a quarterly meeting to know about the progress rather than finding out a year from now that we need another extension. So, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, we could, I mean, we have the quarterly SPF meetings, that's a good idea. We could actually provide an update on this very subject.
On
at those
this
meetings.
negotiation for this topic?
Well,
Again, we're new council, I'm asking
Sure, and
questions.
the contract's in place now, so, you know, there's really not, we don't need to negotiate. I mean, it's just really, this is just extending the existing contract, which already has the dollar amount established in it. So we're just extending it for a time period, so a 12-month time period. So
Okay,
I'm not
and
sure.
this is a 50-year contract?
No, it's, the contract, how can I describe this? So the contract basically just provides a vehicle, you know, a contractual relationship that allows DWR to convey these payments over to the city. Once the new FERC license is issued, that's actually going to trigger whatever's left in this pot of money. Whatever's left in that will then be given to the city for the Supplemental Benefits Fund. That will also then trigger a annual payment. That's an additional payment. If it's a 50-year license term, that'll be $1 million a year that will be triggered at that point. So, but that is all pending license issuance. It's just going to sit and wait until we actually have the license issued from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
So you've been giving payments to the SBF out of the $4.1 million?
Yes.
And how much have you given the SBF?
All but $235,000.
Yes, that's what
So.
we have remaining in that 4 million.
So it started, and so the idea was there was going to be this one big lump sum payment upon issuance of the new FERC license. DWR accepts the license. We would then have some kind of ceremony with the city. But, you know, no one back then had anticipated it would take this long. But, you know, it was starting to, we could see on the horizon that it was taking longer than expected. So we just decided to go ahead and have this relationship to keep the SBF committee going, to have them have some operating funds. And so we have been doing this $100,000 a year effort ever since then. So that went for about 7 years. And then in 2017, after, you know, everything that happened, there was basically this bunch of money sitting in the account. So we said, well, why don't we just advance that right now? And so that's what we did in 2017. That's been the $3 million that just went out for the NOFA in the last year or so. That, you know, you were part of that process that you know, gave out that money recently. So that's where that big lump sum came from. So now, you know, we've been making all these withdrawals on that 4.1 for the 4,135,000. So all that's left now is 235,000. So conceivably, you know, if we do this right now, we'll be able to make the payment next January of 2020, and then there'd be 135,000 left, and then we, you know, probably do the same thing the following year. But then when the new FERC license is issued, assuming that you know, happens sometime in the not too far into the future, that will then trigger this other funding mechanism, which is the $1 million a year if it's a 50-year license term.
So what happens if we get to the end of this 4.1 million and the license isn't in place? Where are the payments going to come from then?
We will be out of money until the new license is issued.
I have a question, and I really don't know this, so it's an honest question. That is, are the water contractors getting their water, and are they paying for that water? And if so, where's that money going?
The water contractors are paying, they are receiving their water and they are paying for it, and the funding is actually coming from the water contractors.
I understand that. So if they're already getting the water and paying for the water, how come SBF isn't getting a regular payment even though the agreement isn't signed, since they're getting the water and paying for it?
Well, so when the settlement agreement was signed, the SPF is a component of the settlement agreement, and it has a bunch of terms in it. So I you know, brought my Bible. This is my settlement agreement. This is just, you know, one chapter in the settlement agreement deals with the Supplemental Benefits Fund. So it's all described in there what the agreement is, how these payments are supposed to go, and so that agreement was made back in 2006.
I stand by my question. I understand what you're saying, but the money's going somewhere, and it seems like it ought to be going to the SBF.
Well, so there's
even if there's a limited agreement. If the water contractors weren't getting their money till the FERC license was signed, I understand that. But what I heard you say is they're getting the water and they're paying for the water. So the money is just sitting there? What's happening to the money that they would be paying to the SBF?
So when the settlement agreement was signed in 2006, it had certain conditions. One of them was for this pot of money to be established. And so what's going on right now is the Supplemental Benefits Fund is receiving money from that pot of money. At a certain point, that pot is going to end, and the other pot of money isn't going to start until the license is issued.
So I guess the request, I'm speaking for the mayor, but I think this is a request that it was anticipated the agreement, the FERC would approve this much earlier.
That is correct.
Obviously, there've been a lot of bumps in the road, I understand that. But doesn't it make sense to renegotiate that agreement you're discussing right now, based upon the fact that the license hasn't been signed?
So that, I mean, that would be a separate agreement that, you know, I mean, certainly if you would like to pose that to my management, you know, I could ask them about that, if, you know, if you would like me to.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, it would, and it would, you know, again, it would be separate from, because this agreement's already been made, the money's already there, so. But, yeah, I mean, that would be a whole new settlement potentially.
Okay. We have some council members in the queue. Councilmember Pittman?
Yeah, this is a long, involved process, and I don't want to wear everybody out, because I could easily go on for 2 hours with the topic here. But essentially what you have is some people in the federal government that have screwed us over for the last 15 years. And that's FERC. And FERC should have a deadline to produce their permit. And I know you don't need to speak on this, but I'm just saying this as a citizen of the United States and a taxpayer, FERC is outrageously irresponsible to continue to drag on this thing time and time again. And that's where our dilemma is stuck at. I agree this agreement is moving forward and has merit, and certainly is a good faith effort. I also want to say it's, a lot of times people will use the word DWR. It's actually state water contractors' money. It's not state taxpayer money. And a lot of people need to, can you hear, is am I on? Yeah, I'm on. A lot of people think it's state taxpayer money. It's not. It's state water contractors' money. DWR is the broker. So I agree this agreement is a good deal because we're stuck with what is going on with the federal government delivering a permit. It should have been issued 10 years ago. And there's a whole list of reasons why it wasn't. It would be nice if we could legislate a deadline stop date with FERC for the process. That would be a big improvement, and maybe a piece of legislation might get introduced to do so. Thank you for your efforts. I appreciate that. I don't have any other questions. I just kind of want to make a statement about it because it's a long, drawn-out process that's been going on since the original license and the permit and the 2100 project altogether. So, thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, $100,000 a year. That's nothing. That's, you know, it's better than 90, but it's not $1 million. So.
I'd love to get to $1 million as soon as we can. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Councilmember Goodson.
You know, it's been a while since I've looked at this settlement agreement, so I'm a little rusty, but I recollect that there's only 2 reasons that settlement can be looked at and renegotiated. And so if we are not in compliance with those conditions, we may run the risk of forfeiting the balance of that 61 million, which is probably about 49 million. So it's just unfortunate, you know. You're having it's a when you take into consideration the balance of that 61 million, do you want to run the risk of forfeiting? And we all understand the promises were not kept, but at what point do you move forward? That's the question.
I'm in agreement with that. At this, at this stage in the game, 11th Amendment here, I mean, it looks like it's just a carrot. It's not coming to fruition. But Vice Mayor Thompson, you're in the queue.
And I know that it's the, just as Councilmember Pittman said, it's really the federal government that has delayed this. I think there was, I don't know how many years with the environmental impact study that was.
Yeah, that did delay the process for a while. We had some biological permits we needed to get. We received that last one in December of 2016. So ever since then, we've been
waiting,
ready to go. I mean, we have all of the permits, the water board certification, the environmental impact report, everything is ready.
And in regards to releasing funds, with the current agreement that we have, are you obligated to give us millions of dollars
Well, right now, in the current situation, since the new FERC license has not been issued,
I mean, up until the FERC license is signed, are you obligated to give us $3 million?
no, that was discretionary that we did.
Correct. And then, do you know by off chance how much money DWR has given to the area through the SBF? I know it's more than 3.
Yeah, I think about 11 million.
About a little over 11 million
Right.
in projects. That's including the initial funds for Riverbend Park.
Yeah, I know that, yeah, Riverbend itself is pretty much there because of discretionary funds. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there.
So this money, what, the ultimate amount is 60 million? Is that what it was?
When you add everything up, the total package will be 61 million. That's if it's a 50-year license, and you add the money that's already been provided back. In the 2000s, there was the Riverbend Park build-outs. So you add up that money. 50 years at $1 million a year would be 50 million, and then this that we're working with right now, this $4,135,000 pot. All of those add up to 61 million.
Okay, yeah, and then that's what I'm getting at is for that amount of money, and we're getting $100,000 a year. That's free money. I mean, why would there ever be an agreement? It's free money. Any other speakers?
Mr. Mayor, I do have 3 public speakers.
Thank you, Eric. I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
That's
You're
okay.
nice guy, but somebody's got to take the hits.
I have Jack Kiley, and then Don Foltz, and then Tasha Levinson.
Good evening. I would just say you not approve this extension here. This amount of money is 60 million, sounds like $1 million a year. But if you watch the supplemental benefits fund, it looks like a bunch of seagulls going after a cracker. It's grossly underfunded. And there's nothing that the city directly benefits from this agreement. And there's been 2 Oroville recreational deal, and the extras have withdrawn from this agreement for a lot of reasons. It's on the website. I don't have a lot of minutes to go into the details, but this is that we also have the safety issues. The reason FERC has delayed this thing is probably because they're doing their job. There's been some things. You had the thing out at the After Bay with the power plant blowing up there. We've had the dumping raw sewage into Lake Oroville. We've had the 2 spillway failures. These things keep coming up that caused a delay for that thing doing it. I would suggest you to withdraw this. You certainly don't take action on approving this tonight. I would suggest you form a committee with the mayor being in charge of that, and you do similar to what the county does. They went through and identified what their actual costs were that would impacted the county, and the city has never done that. And I'll guarantee you it's a lot more than that. You just, in the police protection, watching the river, doing the various things in the parks and things, it's a lot more. It's time to back off on this thing. Don't keep renewing it year after year and blaming it on the FERC. We need to renegotiate this. That's why the other local ones have gone. And I'd like to see the city join in with the county, at least get united on getting our funding that we should be getting from this assessment. When the Metropolitan Water District has 12 million customers down there, and their water bills are a half of what ours are, $1 a month is $12 million. There's a lot of money there, and you're just getting, I think you've touched on it, Mayor, your portion of getting this here is utterly ridiculous, this thing. It needs to be revisited. It's not due until July 20th. I would suggest you take your time and look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Foltz.
October 16th, I talked to the council about dam safety, pointing out that when Folsom Dam had a similar problem, they got a complete new lower level auxiliary spillway, and all Oroville got was cement thrown at a hillside below their emergency spillway. Emergency as in this isn't supposed to be used ever. I talked about problems and potential problems with the gates of our main spillway. I talked about several other safety related issues. Some call that fear-mongering, but my speculations were not the result of rumors, but information from reports from dam safety experts and risk management experts, people who've studied the dam from its inception to now. When I finished my talk, the mayor, Linda Dahlmeyer, said everything that man said is true. I wish she had had the courage to finish the sentence. The last half of the sentence was clearly but City Hall isn't going to do anything about it. DWR says the dam is safe, but I wonder what the justification for believing them is. It certainly isn't a history of honesty. Dam safety is why they haven't been relicensed. It is irresponsible for the City Council to be signing any agreement, especially one that does so little for the city, with an entity as irresponsible as DWR. I understand City Hall's admiration for project funding and a perceived need to downplay dangers at the dam, but nothing harms the perception of Oroville as a safe place to live like City Hall's refusal to hold DWR accountable. You're one catastrophe away from presiding over a ghost town, and should that catastrophe occur, I can already hear the cries of, "We didn't know." The dam sits at 10 feet from going over the not-to-be-used emergency spillway with enormous snowpack sitting above the dam and crazy May weather outside. So spare me the culture change at DWR BS. Should there be a problem with the new spillway or the old gates, where? Fill in the blank.
I'm Tasha Levinson, and then Celia Hirschman.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to give you just a brief bit of history with this. I'm sorry, I actually made up a little cover sheet that kind of explains this whole settlement agreement, and I will get that to you this week. It's just a one-page thing to kind of walk you through, which is about this much in documents. This whole settlement agreement that requires us to not do anything to interfere with their continuing license came about because they had breached an agreement that they had for roughly 50 years in operating the dam. That breach then led to this settlement. One of the main terms of the settlement is you can get up to $60 million. However, if it's a shorter license, that will be reduced by $1 million a year by the shorter term of the license. So don't think of yourself as giving up necessarily $50 million. You don't know. This has been gone on for all this time because of, yes, this biological study, and then FERC did not have a quorum. Then there was the spillway disaster. As far as I'm concerned, the spillway disaster was DWR failing on their basic requirement under the settlement agreement, which was to maintain that dam safely so that no matter what we do, they're the ones who breached it. However, apparently, we've decided to just accept their breach and say it's just fine with us that they did this. At the very least, I would delay until you study and know what you're doing. You don't have to renew this meeting. You can do it next meeting. You could do it a meeting after that. I believe you have till July 20th to do it. You should know what you're doing. I think a vote in ignorance is just a wrong vote to make. Sorry to be so pushy about this. This one really makes me mad. Thank you.
Celia Hirschman, and then Marlene Del Rosario.
I just wanted to say, this is the carrot. It's a perfect analogy that I've seen in the 10 years of living here. I think I wrote 7 grants for it, 5 of which were funded. So it's been a long time, but I read through the settlement agreement, and it seems that it is the way in which we can sleepily sit here while our biggest asset and our biggest really investment as a town is being managed, and we're being parsed out like a trust fund baby. I would recommend that you put together a committee that knows the insides and out. I totally agree. And whatever you sign, you make sure it's to the best interest. You have some significant water issues in this town anyway, and this seems like a perfect opportunity to get it right, finally. I'm not a legal person. I can't speak to how to do that yet, but I definitely wouldn't make any decisions tonight until you're all equally well informed. Thank you.
Our last public speaker is Marlene Del Rosario.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. When I was on the council, I voted against renewal of this contract. But I have a question tonight. Is this pot of money just sitting there, and is it getting interest? And if it is getting interest, who's getting the interest? Is that what they're paying us with, is the interest on this money? It's just something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. That's what I meant by free money. Vice Mayor Thompson, you're in the queue.
I'm not sure if, Jordan, if you're the one to clarify this with, but this vote for tonight specifically is not debating or, we can debate the validity of the Settlement Agreement Act and whatnot, but this vote tonight specifically, I'm not sure if subsidiary is the right word, but the bank holder for the funds for the SBF. From my understanding, that is what this vote is tonight. It isn't whether or not we're going to cancel the settlement agreement or not agree to it. Specifically, this vote tonight is whether or not we will be the bank for the SBF.
Scott, can you speak to that?
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
No, that's not correct. This would, so the SBF was formed, but because the SBF is not an entity that regularly existed before, they needed some operator to act on behalf of the SBF, and the city is that operator.
Right, that middle one who holds the finances.
Yeah. This agreement actually extends the contract for 1 year.
Right, in which
If-
we will be the bank holder.
We would be the bank holder once the funds come in. If you don't agree to extend this contract, it expires in June?
July.
July. It expires on July 20th if you don't. That creates a set of issues that we would have to, it is an unknown path that we would have to go down, because if the agreement expires, how can you then get money when FERC issues the license? It creates a host of issues that we would have to try and figure out. And if you've ever dealt with the state and DWR, and again, I'm not trying to be offensive, they just operate slowly. Many members of the public think that cities operate slowly. Well, we have nothing on the state. And again, that's not a critical comment. That's just a reality. Things just move slowly when you have large agencies that have multiple layers of decision makers.
So I guess my question is, again, going back to this, so our position in this interaction is, because the settlement agreement is made up of how many entities?
Those 50 some odd entities, many of which don't exist anymore.
So our action or our place, our position in this is I use the word bank, but we're the ones who receive the funds. And so our position here is whether or not we choose to continue to be that part in the.
Sort of as a trustee.
Exactly. So this, again, going back to my original statement, so this vote pretty much specifically addresses whether or not we will continue to be the trustee, the one receiving the funds for the SBF.
In large measure, yes. Now, I will say this. There was a comment that was made, I believe it was by the mayor, about asking for additional funding for these years while it's being extended out. If that's the desire of the council, we can certainly have those discussions, but I can tell you they cannot happen before June or July. It's a literal impossibility with DWR. It just simply won't happen.
And I think, Mr. Vice Mayor, if we were to not approve or go forward with this extension of this contract, essentially what we're signifying is a single entity that we are on the path of withdrawal from the SBF, which would trigger other things that we would have to do at that point. So if we do not extend the contract, that's the message that we're sending, and the likelihood of any negotiation over the next year to provide additional dollars is probably nil or none.
Zero.
Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, this is a really simple issue. The settlement agreement in 2006 signed a certain amount of money to the community for PM&Es, prevention, mitigation, enhancements. Since the license wasn't issued, the council asked for some advance money. That's all this is advance money on that original agreement. We have no power to go back and cancel and negotiate that. I don't know who thinks we do. We have zero, none. And if you step out of the settlement agreement, you are nothing. You exist to nothing. We are part of the settlement agreement. We should steward that as best we can and gladly accept this advance money. And let's hope that the FERC license is issued. If we don't accept this advance money, then all the projects that have been funded recently through the SBF here in this community would have died, and they will not see any more funding. The Nelson Avenue Pool, The trail, $260,000, $750 for the Nelson Avenue pool.
New marquee at the stage.
The stage effort, the aquatic center out at the North Forebay. We've got a lot of huge improvements being made that are part of the settlement agreement. That was the plan. The SBF is just a mechanism for that. I'm not sure where everybody thinks that you have a negotiating power. You don't. I don't know who thinks you do, but you don't. You just don't. So this is an advance money. If we turn it down, you got nothing. Just that simple.
Councilmember Goodson.
Just for clarification purposes, if we step out of the conduit position, who would step in? One of the other
As the fund
50
administrator?
entities? Yes.
The only
Who
other entity in the
would
city
be-
of Oroville would be Feather River Park and Recreation. They would have to accept that duty. And then we would lose our 3 seats on the steering committee.
All right.
And we would lose, in rough terms, any skin in the game as the city of Oroville being the fund administrator.
Thank you. Do you
Mr.
have
Attorney.
them?
Excuse me. Mr. Kiley, did you wish to speak?
I handed out a sheet of paper to give the, excuse me, I handed you out a sheet of paper to sort of give the history of the supplemental benefit fund. And what this was is FERC required, since the city and the counties, the local agencies weren't getting any money, they negotiated. This is basically what this fund is this, you buy the cities off, you got the $1 million a year for these 51 entities or whatever it is, and that's what the settlement agreement was. That was the reason for it. And in return for that, is you would support the relicensing of the dam, and that was the buyout. So they give you this $1 million, so you would not object to the relicensing of the dam. And so there's new issues. So the question is, yes, there is opportunities if you withdraw. There's other things you can do. You could withdraw like the equestrians have, and ORAC has drawn. There's people that have withdrawn for this. They're not bought off by this money. So, I mean, that's an option you have. I'm not saying you should take it or not, but it's something worth looking at. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm all for the relicensing. I'm just against we keep kicking this can down the road, and Councilmember Pittman.
Well, and I understand your concern. At the same time, my suggestion might be, let's approve this contract to move forward and then form the committee and start the discussion and negotiations if you want something different. That would be another step in the process, because if you don't take the money, you're not gonna get it. Just that simple. And I don't know why anybody thinks it's gonna be any different. And that was an incorrect statement too. The SBF was created by the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement, it was the DWR's good faith to FERC that they're satisfying the recreation component of the license, which is a new law that was not part of the original license in the 60s. There was no recreational component. The federal government added a new recreational component, and that's what the whole relicensing was about. That's why we negotiated for 10 years a $1 billion deal for the community, because the little bit of the SBF is a small portion of the entire thing that happens. DWR has an office of 11 people getting ready once the license is issued to do all the other enhancements. There's like 400 or 500 million in recreation enhancements. There's fish enhancements. There's a whole wide range of things. We're really small in that process. And this was only done to help with the local economy of the Oroville community. That's what this is advance money for. Now, if you want to just throw it away and say, forget it, that's what you're going to do if you decide not to sign this contract. And anybody in here that tells me different hasn't sat through 15 years of negotiations for this contract. So if you want to move forward and have a renegotiation of the contract, I'm fine with that. But let's get this one moving forward, because if you don't have this money, there won't be any money for the SBF to even exist.
Mr. Mayor, if I may suggest, listening to Councilman Pittman's suggestion, if the council chooses to renew this contract tonight, then I would suggest that the council direct Jordan, who is the SBF coordinator, to make sure that this item is agendized at the SBF committee. And at that level, they can work with any negotiations that are necessary with DWR and the water contractors, who are both represented on that panel. I think instead of forming another committee, we should probably just utilize the one that we already have.
Yeah, you do it that way.
Councilmember Goodson?
I was listening to what Councilman Pittman was saying in regards to if this is not approved, then we would potentially be missing out on the enhancements and things that DWR had promised approximately 50 years ago. Am I correct? Is that what you were saying?
No.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
50 years ago, the recreation component was not in the license. But in the 50 years, the federal law passed a recreation component must be in all FERC-issued power licenses.
All right.
And that's what caused the renegotiation of the new contract, to have all this discussion with all the different 50 entities, and actually created the settlement agreement.
Excuse me.
In terms of license issuance, the Oroville project, and I actually went to a conference on this and sat through a long dissertation about it, is the largest, longest relicensing in the history of the world. And it's essentially that the federal government has put all these components in, and no one's ever had to do this before. So, I mean, they're writing a whole new deal with this thing. And that's why it's very complex. It's different because the federal law has changed in the issuance of power licenses. Before, when this one was first issued, there was no requirement for recreation. Honestly, there were promises made, but they were not in agreement. There was no signed agreement to deliver those promises.
Right. Thank you.
My logic may be off, but if, say, I owe somebody $1 million and I can get away with giving them $100 a year instead of giving them the $1 million, what would be my incentive to come to the agreement where I would have to give them the $1 million? That's just my logic. I might be off on this, and I apologize if I am. Councilmember Draper.
Councilmember Draper, if I could just real quickly, whoever has a red Toyota pickup with a camper shell on it, you've left your headlights on, and the alarm's now going off and on intermittently on it, so you may want to go shut your headlights off.
That would be
Well, from what I'm hearing, and I know that constituents are concerned about dam safety, and I know people are concerned about retaining the SBF money. It sounds like it might be a compromise, like Chief Legrone suggested. If we do go ahead and approve this one, and then the SBF committee looks into renegotiation and other aspects that people have shared their concerns about, might be a compromise.
Councilmember Goodson.
I'm hoping somebody has the answer to this. It's my understanding that the county bowed out of that settlement agreement, and is it because they're in the process of renegotiating?
The county is currently in litigation with the DWR over the loss of property tax and other revenues that would have been generated from the land that was actually covered when the lake was filled. So there's actual pending litigation right now with the county. And
Yeah, the county has never been in the agreement.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have a unique position as a fiduciary to hand out these funds and a voting body on this board, SBF. So we're in a complete different position than the county. But I appreciate everyone's comments. If there are no more comments, I'm looking for a motion on this item.
I make a motion to adopt resolution number 8784.
I'll second that motion.
Should there be a mention of the SBF committee pursuing, should that be mentioned in that as well?
I think that's a great idea. We can
Because
still
that-
mention it as a part of the second, under discussion, can't we?
Yep.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
Would you care to amend your motion, Vice Mayor?
Motion amended.
I think we understood that.
All right.
Okay.
Motion carries.
The only addition I would make to that, just so we're all aware, and that is that we're going to have to use our attorney's time, who is also the attorney for the SBF, because obviously the board itself is not going to be involved in any negotiation.
Sure.
And it may be that we have to bring in outside resources. I think it is a good idea to renew and then discuss over the next year.
It might go there first with the council, this SBF committee, and then from there we can,
Agreed.
yeah.
Okay, moving on to reports, discussions, and correspondence. Council announcements and reports. Councilmember Draper, do you have anything?
The right date. Okay, I'm on the committee with several other community members, and we met on May 8th and worked on planning for the Oroville Police Department meet and greet to be held in July.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith?
So yesterday, the Continuum of Care met, and they're continuing to hone in on providing services for the homeless. And within that 4-hour-plus discussion, one thing came to light, that Oroville has no nonprofit or agency that's a part of the HMIS system, which is essentially a computer system that helps facilitate intake of the transients, the homeless, whatnot. And so that is just another additional piece where we need to continue to have a presence at the Continuum of Care and make our pitch that Oroville and our nonprofit agencies need to be funded appropriately. Going back again to the previous council when they voted that Oroville is in the midst of a shelter crisis, I think any of us that look around can see that there are some concerns, to say the least, about what's happening. And so tomorrow there's another Continuum of Care meeting. I think it's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in Chico. And so if anyone's interested in attending that, there are some dollars that have been freed up that I'm hopeful that the Continuum of Care will see fit to fund some of our nonprofits here that have made application, so that we can move forward and begin to address something that touches each and every one of us. Homelessness may not be a problem in your personal life, but it affects all of us in a lot of ways. And so, again, I'm hopeful that we can, our nonprofits can have a higher degree of participation within Continuum of Care, and that the folks and the needs that need to be serviced here in Oroville will be considered. So that's what's happening in the moment.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodson?
Yes, I attended the meet and greet, the Oroville Police Association and the community. The meet and greet has been going on for a number of years, and I appreciate the fact that we're continuing to move forward once again. Last year, for reasons that I won't go into now, we had postponed that event. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the Feather Fiesta Parade. I heard it was quite successful, but I had an opportunity to observe a youth offender diversion program at Mule Creek State Prison, something that is very much different from Scared Straight, and I was glad that I was able to take advantage of that opportunity. It just fell on that day where there was a conflict of scheduling. Wednesday, May 15th, this was a unique meeting, and as a vice president of the NAACP Butte County Local Chapter 1029, I was asked to attend a private meeting at the request of the State of California Department of Justice, Office of the Attorney General Bureau of Children's Justice, and the Civil Rights Enforcement Division. Apparently, there has been some complaints. We were not privy to who those complaints came from, but regarding Butte County, which has the highest rate of suspension of African American students, and they were looking for answers, and this will be an ongoing investigation. Unfortunately, we're not able to weigh in or give the findings of that investigation. May 13th, I attended a Juvenile Justice Detention Commission board, which I am on. And what's interesting is this affects all of our children. Butte County, and as we know, the city of Oroville is a part of that. And in our continuation and alternative educational programs, truancy and suspensions have escalated tremendously in recent months. And we needed to meet to get an understanding of how this is affecting our school systems and our community, especially if we want to become a healthier community. And so what was a concern was the schools are starting to lose their ability to tolerate the aggressive behaviors in our students. One of the reasons is due to multiple families living in a single family dwelling due to the Camp Fire incident. Vaping has increased, and unless the crimes are serious, those that are under the age of 12 cannot be prosecuted. The common denominator we find is that that seems to drive these behaviors is poverty, and it is no secret that 34 to 38% of our residents in Oroville live below the poverty level.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Thompson.
Just would like an update on the railing, Chief Legron.
Wow. I know.
Working on it.
It's pretty bad.
Thank you, sir.
It'll be coming back to you once we get a more definitive answer on our sewer pipeline going through there, and exactly, I want to coordinate both of these together. So we're working with Mike.
Were there some designs that were going to come out, or?
We potentially have some railing designs. They don't meet my keen eye, but Mike seems to think they're safe. So
Will we see those designs at next council, or?
Yes, I'll make sure that we get those to you. We're going to get them cleaned up a little bit because, you know, to an engineer's eye, it might make sense, but to the rest of us, we have no idea what they're trying to show us. So we'll get them a little bit better drawing.
Maybe you could sit in and argue on the arguments with
Yes.
Wade and I and Bill.
Would love to.
He wants them to look really nice, and I just want them to survive getting hit by a car.
I agree.
So. We're almost there.
What about a cinder block wall? Do we know any masonry companies?
If you know a good masonry company.
Welcome to make a motion, sir. Councilmember Pittman, please.
Yeah, the question I have is, oh, that thing is humming here. Okay, no. There we go. I've had a couple of folks in the neighborhood asking about speeding and the potential of having a speed bump or something like that installed, in particular out in around the Morningside and Rancho Golden, Morningstar, excuse me. And I know we've had them installed on Spencer Avenue, so I guess what I'm also looking for is the potential of a policy for neighborhoods you know, whether it's, you know, the neighborhood sign a petition to have one put in? Can we do it cheaper with a asphalt one versus a plastic one? Something like that.
So Bill, Mike, and I have discussed this because several of you sent us notes. Mike is actually prepared to talk about bringing a policy forward to look at these and potentially also then looking at a mechanism to determine whether neighborhoods want it and it's warranted. And based on your comments, actually, we've asked Mike to address that. So Mike, you might talk about it now.
Yeah, so I've started talking to my staff, and they're pulling some information for me on reference material. We pulled the traffic calming policy from Chico. It's a little more robust than I think we'd want to use here, but basically what we're planning to bring forward is a traffic calming management policy for consideration at council. So we're going to draft something up, and what we want to do is just do a better job of how we're going to document complaints from folks and document our process for assessing them. You know, obviously we don't want to be putting in a speed bump for every time there's a concern about speeding. There's a process, and in the past we've had traffic warrants done and done analysis, traffic counts, speed surveys. Those can cost between $10,000 and $15,000 per traffic warrant, and you know, spending that money and then having at the end have the conclusion be, well, it doesn't meet the criteria, you know, the speeds aren't high enough or the volumes aren't high enough to put in a speed hump or a calming system. That would be a disappointment given the money we spent. So we want to adopt a policy and bring one forward for your consideration that will be a little bit more robust in how we process these requests.
Or, I mean, clearly it would be council's determination. Unless council deferred to staff on it, it's up to how you set the policy up. But we've also talked about a way to have a one-time cost and basically then make these studies very affordable. Because obviously we've looked at what Mike is saying, and we don't want to spend $15,000 at a crack.
Right.
But we will bring that policy back. I can't promise it'll be the next meeting, but it'll be very soon, though.
I would add too in that commentary that in the roundabout up here at Montgomery and Bridge, the folks coming down the hill from the bridge for some reason feel that they have the right of way consistently, and that might be a great place for a speed bump right there, because the cars stacking get stacked up that hill all the way up to Norton Street. And now I'm seeing people drive over on Norton Street to drive over to go hook up on Bridge and come down the hill just like the rest of them do. So there might be a thought pattern there to put one there to slow the people coming downhill. Because it does stack up that hillside. It's crazy.
I know that when I was growing up, the street was always full of kids. We were always out there playing something, and my dad had a pretty good method. He had a bucket of rocks right by the door there, and when we'd hear the cars come speeding down the road, he'd plant one of them rocks right in the middle of the driver's door. But you probably can't do that anymore. Yeah, okay.
It's not advisable. Let's put it under that term.
Very effective, though. Councilmember Hatley?
Yes. Last night I attended the Veterans Memorial meeting, and they're talking about, they were trying to figure out some way to partner with the city, Feather River Parks and Rec, and the county, and go from River Bend all the way to the Memorial Park, trying to light that trail and do some other things, some other improvements that they were talking about that they would like to do. And so it's my understanding that they're going to be approaching the city on that and trying to work as a unit, and all three put their heads together and figure out the best way to get that done, if at all possible, because it all comes down to dollars and cents. They also had they are going to order a new bench for the park, one they hope that won't be destroyed or can be destroyed. It's out of marble or something. It's something, but they were afraid of the the transit and the skateboarders and stuff like that trying to use it, but they think they have a way to fix that so that that won't happen. But anyway, that's just another project. They asked me to be the speaker at the memorial service on Monday at the cemetery. It was a great honor for them to ask, and I accepted. I told them I would run it by the council though tonight, because if anybody has a problem with that, please say so. I have no issue. This is not a ego thing for me or anything else. I would like to do it, but if somebody has a problem with it, why, please say so. You won't hurt my feelings at all. But I told them that I would run that by the council.
I personally can't think of anybody that I'd rather recommend. Art, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, and that was all. That was the end of the meeting.
Okay, let's see, we had a closed session
Can
meeting.
I interrupt you for a minute? I've been in the queue for about 10 minutes.
Oh, I
but-
didn't know we were using it for this. We went in
Yeah, yeah.
succession.
I just wanted to add something after
I think it's been
hearing-
9.5.
After hearing Counselor Smith's comments, I wanted to elaborate a little bit. In early March, I was on an ad hoc committee for the Continuum of Care, and we met 2 times. And the other members of the committee were Anastasia Snyder, Alex Brown, William Scott Huber, Lisa Courier, and I. And our task was to evaluate the rubric they had used for scoring the profits for the HEAP funding. And so I made it very clear, and so did the others, that we felt that the rubric was flawed. It wasn't weighted in favor of emergency housing at all. And so some projects got money that really weren't about emergency housing. And the second thing that I said was, as someone who is an advocate for Oroville, I was very disappointed that we only got the 2 14-unit complexes that Ron Reed is building. And we had the Haven of Hope shelter and also the rescue mission that had applied. And I was told in no uncertain terms that there would be no other distribution of funds other than what the original committee had already decided on. There was no leeway with that. And the other thing I was told, and I wanted to pass this on, that the 2 nonprofits from Oroville were turned down, I was told, because they did not have their HMIS processes in place. And so if they can get that stuff in order, maybe it will go better next time, I hope. And I'm not sure if she meant they weren't in place or they were flawed, but that was the glitch that she said. Okay.
Pastor Terry.
The HMIS system is cumbersome and flawed at best. We have tried 4 times to start it. It would take 2 people, nothing but their job, 8 hours a day, to enter all the data in that they want. So that means I'd have to hire 2 people on my budget, and it's an unfunded mandate. So they say that if we don't have HMIS, we can't even be a part of the coordinated entry system. And so they'll use that then to deny us. But the fact of the matter is we do qualify for the grants, and on the NOFA that's about to come out, they've changed it. What Councilmember Draper has said is true. They would not allow anything else, but now they've changed it. They're about to put another NOFA out on a grant that all the RFPs came in on. Ours part of that. Haven of Hope's part of that. They're about to put another one out when they said they would not do it because of time constraints. Now they're going to do it because they have to do this now. When the Jesus Center turned down their money, they recommend the money go to Safe Space. Safe Space didn't apply. Safe Space has never been a member of the Continuum of Care until just suddenly. And do you see the picture here? And now they've even said in this NOFA that there will be no capital funding here. This NOFA that's available is $450,000. The property is $427,000. But now they've taken capital out of it. So they're changing the rules of the game. And they're using HMIS to blame it. We've told them we would do it, but every time we've set up a volunteer, they look at the sheer magnitude of the work and they run. They just run from us. So you look like you have a question.
Councilmember Goodson.
It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Bunker did volunteer. Yes.
Yeah. That was when I brought that up several months ago, and Sherry, you did volunteer.
There you go.
But they don't want to, we put a statement that we had 2 credible volunteers that were ready to step up and do that, and they just flatly denied it. They ignored us. They don't want to volunteer. They want us to have a paid position because somehow that means something to them.
All right.
Okay. Pastor Terry, I'd approach Ms. Bunker after the meeting.
Thank you, Pastor.
Ways in one.
Thank you,
Mr.
Pastor
Mayor.
Terry.
Councilmember Smith, you're in the queue.
Yeah. I was hopeful we didn't get quite in so much of the weeds on this because it can go on all night. But I want to say that it's not over until it's over. And so we're going to take it on tomorrow. And hopefully we'll be able to deal with some of the issues that have been raised here. That being said, in the great wisdom of the COC being predominantly Chico-centric board panel, other than a couple of us from Oroville, and I just say that tongue-in-cheek because it was pointed out that I was Oroville-centric. And yes, I am. And I think you folks would want me to be that way, as was Ms. Draper when she was on that panel. That being said, since in that great wisdom of the COC, they saw to it to direct the majority of the dollars to Chico and to the shelters that are there, and in particular, the Torres shelter got quite a bit of funding. I approached one of the board members and I said, well, then, since this is county funding and you're a county program, then it would seem logical then when our law enforcement encounters someone that needs to go to a shelter that we can transport them up there. And they agreed to that. So I know there's been these rumors tossed around that, somehow Chico homeless find their way to Oroville. There are some that would confirm that. But, without getting into a spitting match on this, which is essentially what it boils down to, this needs to be fixed. I think in great faith that a previous council saw to it to apply for this funding, and it needs to be addressed. And I'm hopeful that we can make our case before the COC and see some funding for Oroville. But just to give you more information, the long and short of it, myself, this council, we're not ready to roll over and allow our community to be overrun without an appropriate funding to mitigate the problem that we all know is out there.
Thank you. Do I ever get to talk? Did you want to speak again? Yeah, you're in the queue again.
With that being said.
Did I cover it?
No, well, yes, other than one very important fact, because if you recall, when the housing crisis became very, of such magnitude, we were the first council out of all the cities in Butte County that declared a housing crisis. And
shelter
here
crisis,
we are
yeah.
now. And, yeah, they wouldn't even give us one kibble.
Okay. Last week we had a closed session meeting, and we announced out of closed session, so I'm able to speak on this. We did the interviews to hire a city administrator, and so at that time, this council was unable to reach a 5-7 vote. So the action that was taken was the city administrator position was vacated. Now, that does not mean that nobody's going to be, and that it's vacated for 60 days. at that time, which somebody will be appointed to that position. But that doesn't mean that there won't be anybody in that position until then. We have contracts with people for consulting and representing that position. So I don't want anyone to think that that it's not going to be covered. So other than that, yeah, the parade was, I don't know, I missed it. I was in it. It was you don't get to watch a parade when you're in it. And but it looked like a lot of people. Looked like they had a lot of fun. So I think we were missing a couple items down there that attracted a lot of people. And I think the chili cook-off and things weren't there, and it was a little bit of a disappointment for that. But anyway, that's all I have. Did you wish to speak again, Councilmember?
I just have a question. Since Mr. Lando's contract is until June 30th, does that mean then this position would be vacant 2 months from June 30th, since we have you in it?
No, May 15th, the day of the meeting.
Okay.
That is accurate. The way my contract reads, it says until there's an administrator, which implies permanent administrator. So it's July 30th or until that position is filled. And obviously the intent when the contract was entered into was that that would occur sooner than June 30th. So unless council changes it, my contract sits until there's an administrator. The position was officially declared vacant at the May 15th meeting. So July 15th would be the 60 days or thereabouts. I haven't counted on the calendar.
Okay, future agenda items. Looks like it's going to be a pretty short meeting next time. Administration reports.
Mr. Mayor, if we just go back up to future agenda items, I know earlier today we had a discussion regarding cannabis and hemp. Was that something you were still interested in us pursuing? The expansion of the definition of cannabis.
That wasn't my interest. I think Councilmember Hatley commented on that.
Okay, because I know there'll be a presentation at the next meeting regarding hemp. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The only thing that I have to report from the administration side of it is it's not good news. The Haven of Hope Resource Center was hoping to open up a wet shelter in the South Oroville area. Late yesterday afternoon, Pastor Thompson called and withdrew his application for that shelter. So there'll be no planning commission meeting this week, and there will be no wet shelter. That's all I have.
Ruth?
Oh, yeah, and you should have found on the dais a departmental update in front of each of you.
I have nothing, just almost finishing the budget on top of everything else, but I'm almost there.
Need an 11th extension? Tom?
Just very quickly, the numbers, Councilmember Draper indicated it, and the numbers we're getting. So we have traffic up by 20-25%. We have population up by 20%. We just heard today solid waste is up by about 21-22%. So it just confirms what you're feeling. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney?
No, sir.
Chief? I would like to make a comment too, at this council meeting, that Joe Deal, his title is Chief Joe Deal right now. That's what he was appointed to, and I would appreciate that that's what he be addressed as. Leo?
Yeah, just a quick update on planning the building. Is that better? That's better. Just a quick rundown on the building activity. Looks like D.R. Horton, actually all 41 homes, 8 are finalized of the 41 permits, but all 41 homes are sold out there at this point in time. The Bluffs are actually kicking off. They received their white papers from the state, which allows them to start selling the existing homes that are out there. and we're working with them to facilitate the process on the public improvement side to help that process get moving. No contracts on an additional 34 out there, but those original ones should start selling here, which will actually offset their cost they have into the project, so that's positive. We additionally have quite a few commercial sites that are actually active and going now. The Chipotle, the KFC, those things are moving along fairly well. On the planning side, and I'm sorry, one other one, 40 temporary housing units out at Mono Avenue have been completed. So those are the FEMA housing out there. On the planning side, we're actually getting some inquiries to reestablish the Ruddy Creek subdivision, start getting that activated again, looking at that. Also, Linkside 2 is actually trying to get that thing rolling again. And then we've had some inquiries on a large parcel of property out off of Wilbur out there, about 162 acres, trying to assemble that and see what we can do there. So on the planning side, that's what's going on there. Very active, full load of inspections every day, and everybody's running around trying to get it all taken care of.
Leo, would you also introduce Wes?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. We also, the planner, principal planner that we brought on board as well is up here 3 days a week right now. He's in the back. It's Wes Irvin with our company. He does a great job for us. So.
Quick question on Feather Bluffs. Did they re-engineer that subdivision to the point where the lots have access across the common area, or do you know what I'm talking about?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we last year we processed lot line adjustments for the majority of the parcels there. So it's been ongoing for a couple of years now. Originally we did public utility easements, then the lot line adjustments, and those got done a while ago. And it kind of stalled out a little bit, and then now they're really moving to get all the site civil improvements completed and
It's good to hear, because that whole subdivision's been tied up for that for almost 30 to 40 years. Because of that.
Yeah.
1977, actually.
Yeah.
So it's good to see that move forward.
Well, I'll tell you, it's really nice to walk through City Hall and see the lights on all them offices and things going on. It's it really is exciting. So, Mike, did you have anything?
Nothing to add. I would just add to Leo's comments that we saw a final parcel map come in for Acacia Estates. So that's been sitting around for a while too, and looks like that's getting moving again.
Okay, well, thank you. Any correspondence? That adjourns our meeting. Next meeting, June 4th, 2019.